enjoy this video while you can, folks, because going off of what happened earlier, and if you follow me on Twitter, you know what I'm talking about. CNN, of course, filing a copyright claim on a video that I made that used some of their content that they didn't want me to use. So, because I'm going to be doing it again, because they're not getting off the hook, I'm going to tell the truth. If they want to block it. Watch it while it's up, because it might not be here for very long. So, it's could go like hotcakes around here. You better get them while they're available, okay? Because unfortunately, I don't have the technology to, broadcast over the East Berlin boundary there when they decide to shut a video down they don't want, used when it involves criticism of their content. So that being said, we're going to talk about that famous guy who used to be in commercials. Matter of fact, he still makes commercials every once in a while, but he's become a famous news reporter for CNN. Before we watch his news clips, let's just take a look at some of his old commercials from back in the day, shall we? I think this would be great.
Flight 892 is now boarding all passengers.
Sir.
I'll get it together. I promise.
An absolute classic. You gotta love his work. He did a great job. But nonetheless, now let's focus on his news reporting. He doesn't like what's going on with the riots and the protests in the streets and what's happening to reporters in the middle of it. So now that we've got nostalgia out of the way, let's see what he has to say about this whole incident. Here is Brian Stelter on his thoughts on his show, Reliable Sources, of course. With it being reliable sources, you know it has to be reliable news too, right? Okay.
The appalling targeting of reporters who are trying to tell America's story. There is so much that's so wrong about this situation. First and foremost, the videos seen around the world. The video of George Floyd's final minutes alive. It's so wrong that it's hard to see. But it is right that we look. It is right that we bear witness. And it is right to see protesters taking action as a result. But it is wrong to see reporters and photographers and news crews being assaulted and arrested at these protests. Police firing rubber bullets at reporters when the reporters are holding up press badges. That doesn't belong in America. Authorities handcuffing reporters is wrong. That's what happens in authoritarian regimes, not in America. But yet it happened again last night in Minneapolis and in New York. These threats against the press are not just coming from police. In recent days, protesters have ganged up on the press in several cities. We've seen a photojournalist attacked. We've seen a TV news crew chased out of a park. That is wrong. Rioters destroying TV news vehicles and stealing cameras is wrong. Almost everybody knows this, and it's right to call it out and say that America is better than this. Reporters don't want to be the story. They just want to tell the stories of the protesters and the police and the residents of these communities that want to be able to feel safe. Let me show you some of the examples of what we've seen in terms of reporters seemingly being targeted. This, for example, was on Friday in Louisville. This is a local CBS reporter and her cameraman in Louisville, Kentucky, apparently shot with pepper balls while live on the air. Later, the police apologized to the station. But we've seen other reporters, here's Dallas, for example, other reporters being hit by rubber bullets, by tear gas. There are these situations we've seen in a number of different cities. I'll read some other examples to you. A reporter in Columbia, South Carolina was hit by a rock and had to be taken to the hospital. Here's a freelance photographer in Minneapolis who was shot in the left eye while covering the protest. She says she's been blinded in one of her eyes as a result. In Chicago, a Chicago Tribune photographer said looters shoved and stole her cameras. In D.C., this is in Washington, in Lafayette Park, a Fox News crew was harassed and then chased out of the park by protesters who were cursing and screaming at Fox News and criticizing right-wing media. This is deplorable behavior by protesters. We've also seen in Las Vegas the arrests of 2 photographers. Police took these photographers into custody. That is completely inappropriate. They were then let out the next morning. You know, we need to follow up on these cases and make sure that people are held accountable when these incidents happen.
Now, I want you to understand what's going on in the streets right now. Even though I don't agree with the way it's being carried out and who the targets are seeming to be, if we're going to take this route as a country and we're really going to have Civil War 2.0 here, I feel like we're going after the wrong things, first of all. But that aside, if it's really coming to this, people in the streets are hostile. And they're out to tear things up. So, in a way, you could almost equivalent this to me, kind of war zone-ish. Maybe not the same extreme as a war zone, but certainly not the casual day of reporting. Now, how many journalists have faced bodily harm or injury reporting in a war zone? I'm not saying that it's justified. What I'm saying is, Brian, you got reporters going right out into the middle of these situations, and you're expecting them to not be harassed, not be hit, not be hurt. How fucking stupid are you? First of all, I always thought that was kind of a risk when these reporters went into these situations, because they knew, just like people who report on the weather. Like, what the hell's his name? Jim Cantori from the Weather Channel, right? I mean, yeah, it's smart to go report in the middle of a hurricane, because I'm sure there's no possibility at all that a massive wind might come and take you away one day. And the next thing you know, you wake up not in Kansas anymore, but in Oz. So, one, again, not saying it was right, but you're bitching and moaning about what happens in the middle of a riot. Really? But again, Brian, I've made my case to the politicians why they have been part of the problem that we've got in the country today. But let's not forget who the part of the other problem is. Who has been doing their reporting? Who has been doing their journalism and propping up the 2 corrupt parties? Because in a lot of cases, your sponsors prop those parties up. Who has not really been informing the American people, Brian? You. And all of your friends at the mainstream media. So, Brian, while you could, when you knew things like the crime bill were passed, when you knew all these things that were going to negatively impact these inner cities, if you were real journalists who wanted to report on real news, you would have held your government's feet to the fire, and you would have come out and told the people of the country what's going on so that they knew and probably could have voted these jackasses out of office a long time ago. But no, you didn't do that. Not just you. I won't put the whole blame on you, but your news network didn't do it. Your colleagues, Fox, NBC, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, none of you did it. Not a one. And so understand you've contributed to what you see in the streets today by not doing your job as news reporters and actually reporting on the things right here in the country that matter. No, Brian, what does your bald-headed ass do every Sunday? Talk about how many spelling errors Donald Trump has in tweets. Because that makes a hell of a lot of difference in this country, doesn't it, Brian? No. That does not do a damn thing to inform the average citizen of what they might need to be rallying against because it's a freedom being taken away by a bunch of corrupt politicians. You don't inform them of things like that, do you, Brian? But even though you want to cover news stories in a way that agitate people while also not really informing people. And then when you get these riots in the streets, that because of the way, maybe not the reporters out there with the camera crew, but the way you anchors of the show present your news to infuriate, divide, while not informing. And now people are pissed. And even though I don't agree with the tactic, they're out there hitting everything in sight and anything in sight. And because your reporters are out there getting caught in the crossfire of a civil war you news networks have helped instigate, you got a problem with that. Here's a bright idea. Why didn't you do your jobs all this time and inform people they could have not voted for politicians who didn't have their best interests in mind? This whole damn thing could have potentially been nipped in the bud a long time ago, but no. All you care about is ratings and money, and that's the bottom line. And you serve the same donors because they run the fucking commercials on your show that they run on banners when they fund rallies for politicians, when they donate lots of money to their super PACs. You're bought and sold by the same bunch of assholes, and that's why you don't hold their feet to the fire. Oh, you'll go out and bash Donald Trump in a heartbeat. But I think any person that's really looked into the facts knows Donald Trump is a problem, but he is not the only problem. The problem was around a long time before Donald Trump, Brian. So, I can understand you don't want to see reporters hurt by this. Understand this, though. It's because of your lousy-ass reporting and not holding your government accountable this entire time so that people were informed enough to vote their asses out that they're finally to their limit. Now you're dealing with the backlash. As we say in the South, Brian, you can't have your cake and eat it too. This is what shitty journalism comes home to roost when you keep putting it out there over and over. This is the chicken that comes home to roost, Brian. There's going to be a lot more of it, especially if you jackasses don't wisen up. And if you choose not to do the right thing, don't bitch. Seriously, don't bitch. So again, to all my viewers out there, this was a pretty lengthy one. I hope you've enjoyed the content because knowing what happened today, I wouldn't be the slightest bit surprised if this video doesn't last up a day or two like another one did. Because this time I actually did kind of unload on CNN. So, who knows? Maybe it'll stay up. Maybe it'll get blocked. But hypocrisy really pisses me off. Really pisses me off.